and then we are going to let you know who are the next. The lady there, please. Your name and outlet, please.
Esta oportunidade, soy Sheriff Chetin de Agencia.
Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. President. I'd like to ask you a question about the situation in Lebanon.
Apenas dia, mais de 500
So over 500 people were actually killed, and now the Israeli military personnel, they announced that they are preparing for a land attack in Lebanon. And how do you, sir, assess this? And do you think maybe it's time to ask for a global weapons embargo to Israel? Thank you.
I think it's important for us to remember that in Lebanon, the total of death toll is 625. It's the largest number of death toll since the civil war that lasted between 87 and 90. It's important also to remember that 93 women have passed away, 50 children, 258 people that were injured, and actually 10,000 people were forced to retreat and were dislodged from their homes. And also in the West Bank, we've seen the death of a lot of people. We have 5,700 people injured in occupied West Bank, 160 children and so on. And we received that 770 people died, according to the health ministry from the Palestine. And besides what I call the genocide, it's important to remember that Prime Minister Netanyahu, he was put on trial by the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and he's convicted as Putin was condemned. And it's important that many discussions were made in the UN Security Council, and many attempts of peace and to ceasefire were passed, and he does not abide to these resolutions. And so that's why we are in this fight to strengthen the UN as a tool that has the strength to make the decisions and make things happen. Well, sincerely, I believe that the countries that sustain the speeches of Prime Minister Netanyahu, I think that these countries that support him should make a more endeavor so that this genocide should stop, because we are now under a situation on one side taking care of the planet to see if we have a better quality of life for the planet and we can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and to diminish the fires and conserve the forests and the water. And on the other hand, on the other side, human beings killing themselves. There's no explanation for that. And so I condemn in a very strong way this kind of behavior from the Israeli government, that I'm sure, absolutely sure, that the majority of the people of Israel does not agree with this genocide. I'm sure of that. It's also important to remember that when everything started, Israel said that it had 1,400 people dead. According to the Israeli government, that is to say, the number has fallen down to 149 of people that were murdered. And so we're fighting to free the hostages from Hamas. It's meaningless. It is meaningless to keep people hostage, innocent people. And so it's important that Hamas give its share of the contribution so that we can have much more emphasis and demand on the Israeli government to release the hostages so that things can go back to normality. So that's it. I think that humanity cannot live with and accept and consider normal what's going on in Israel and what's going on in the Gaza Strip and what's going on in Sudan, Yemen, and West Bank that is occupied. Please, Mariana, you have the floor. Mariana Sanchez from BBC Brazil. Here in Brazil, at the UN, Mr. President, you said you repeated the urgency, the need of decarbonizations of the economies, including Brazil. But here in New York City, you had a meeting outside the agenda with Shell, and Shell has interest to exploit oil in the Equatorian Basin. This caused uncomfort and sees a contradiction between the two messages. What can you say about that? Well, first of all, I don't see any contradiction. I received entrepreneurs that they exist in Brazil for 100 years. I'm only 70, 80 years of age, so it means that when I was born, Shell was already in Brazil for 22 years. They've been in Brazil for 100 years, and it's a company that has given a contribution within the rationale of the demands of the energy policies to Brazil. First of all, so I talked with a company that has investments for 100 years in Brazil, and they will continue to invest in Brazil. It's a partner of Petrobras, and 60% of the wells that went to auction, and it will only go to the Equatorial margin when the Brazilian government authorizes the prospection in the Equatorial Amazon region. Now, but what we need in terms of awareness is that we are not in a world that we can say, now we can end with fossil fuel and then we'll have alternative fuels. No, it's necessary that when we say such a thing, how it's going to happen, how the planet Earth will survive without fossil fuel until we have self-reliance on other forms of energy. The electric car is very good, but it's something that's just it's an inception. The hydrogen car could be something good, but it's still incipient. And so what we have is the solution. And Brazil, I should say, is the only country that for a long time has the possibility to have car driven by ethanol, fossil fuel, and alcohol. And when we do the blend of 30%, and Shell fuel also gets blended 30% of ethanol, we're selling the less pollutant gasoline than the rest of the world compared to and the same thing we can say for biodiesel. So we're going to use the potential of exploitation of oil in Brazil so that we can transform Petrobras in an energy company and not just in an oil and gas company. When oil is over or ended, Petrobras must produce other sources of energy that Brazil needs and the world needs. And so I see no contradiction.
Yes, Mr. President, this is the Indian media.
Just a minute, please, 1 second.
Yes.
Listo.
Yeah, this is Ayush Garg from Ian Express, Indian media. Now, when Brazil assumed the G20 presidency, you had proposed a global alliance against hunger and poverty towards the SDG 1 and 2 goals. Now, this document has been endorsed by the G20 countries, and the alliance is going to be launched at the Leaders Summit in the coming month. Now, what I want to know from you is, what is the vision of the alliance? In particularly, the interesting fact about the alliance is that there are no conditionalities you are proposing to impose on the countries when distributing funds to them. And second, you have proposed a project, I believe it's Bolsa Familia, as a country project that can be scaled up to be implemented in Africa, across Asia. So can you give us some details about that, and how many countries have proposed to join this alliance as of today?
Well, for me, for my joy, the Global Alliance Against Inequality, Poverty, and Hunger has been a success. And up till now, all the countries that we have been talking to, they have had an extraordinary position to accept to participate in this global alliance. I do not believe that there's one president in any country that will refuse to participate in something of this magnitude, of these banners that we see, which is the fight against inequality, poverty, and hunger. Why so? Because there's no way to oblige the the countries to give their contribution, to give a handout money. There's no way. What Brazil do with the G20 is to show the role models and give examples of successful public policies in Brazil, and to study other successful policies in other countries. And with a set of successful policies around these issues, we will be able to prove that the only possibility that we have to fulfill this goal is for us to include the poor people in the national budget of each country. It's not to do it only when it's possible. It's not to do it when you have money left over. No, you have to take this as a priority, that you have to place in the budget the poor people, include them in the national budget, so that when you're building the budget of a country, we know that the poor will have the security and safety, that they will be taken care of. And we have an example in Brazil. It's not only Bolsa Família. Bolsa Família is only one ingredient. We have the increase of minimum wage. We have the increase of financing for small farmer, microcredit for small farmer. We have programs for small business. We have programs with water tanks, and we have we have many social programs. We can do many things, but we cannot do is just stand still and see that results from the surveys and statistical data. No, the world produces enough food to end with hunger in the world. It is necessary that we build the conditions so that people will have a minimum of resources so that they can buy for their meals. So I think it's an extraordinary banner. And it's a banner that is very important. I think it's going to be the most important thing that we will have to do and to fulfill. I'm very optimistic because all the countries were very favorable to this proposal. Let me make a mistake. I gave out here the wrong information. The Israeli authorities gave us the number of fatalities of 1,405, and they reduced that to 1,139. So this, if I didn't say that with this accuracy, maybe I didn't read it yet, but here, this is what I have here written. And the authorities have revised the attacks of 7 October. They're from 1,405 to 1,203. That's it? Is the figure, correct figure? Okay. All right.
Sorry.
Boa tarde, Presidente Ismar Madeira.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. You just mentioned in the opening statement problems with the wars and difficulties with world governance. And yesterday, the Ukrainian President Zelensky quoted Brazil in a speech, and he complained about a colonial vision on Ukraine and the proposal that you just mentioned, Brazil and China proposal. And he says that Ukraine will not accept an alternative solution for full peace, that they will not make concessions on the integrity, totality of their. How do you see Zelensky's speech? Because the criticism also is mentioning the name of Brazil, the country Brazil. I think that you said the obvious. He has to defend the sovereignty of his country. That's obvious. He has to be against occupation of their territory. But what he's not managing to do is to build peace. And what we're proposing is not building peace just for them. We're calling their attention that only peace, that they should take into consideration, that only peace will guarantee that Ukraine will survive as a sovereign country. This is what we're calling. We're drawing their attention. They don't have to accept Brazil's proposal and China's proposal. There's no proposal. We just have an assumption that it's important to start the conversations towards peace. But Zelensky, if he was smart, he would have said something different, that the solution is a diplomatic solution, not a military solution. And this depends on the capacity to sit around the table and talk and to listen different opinion and try to reach an agreement so that the Ukrainian people have peace in their lives. That's it.
A gente vai ter que encerrar porque
We will now have to close because we have a flight that we have to take back to Brazil. And since I'm a highly Democrat, and since I'm a highly Democrat citizen, I'll allow 2 more questions. Now, please ask questions that are more intelligent, that I can answer the question. Just a second, the president has to put his headset. Just a minute. I have to make a sandwich of questions. You asked a meeting with the ratings agency here in Brazil, and you talked with the 3 major ratings agency, and we stood from Minister Haddad that if Brazil can go back to the investment grade within your term. So we'd like to listen a little bit about that. And the Chilean president make a complaint, a very aggressive complaint in the meeting on the Pact for the Democracy, demanding from you and other presidents would use the same tool to measure dictators and presidents that commit violation, Putin, Maduro, Ortega, and so maybe I would like you to comment the criticism that came from Boric. Do you know what is the essence of democracy? It's for people to say what they want to say. And we will have to listen to what he said. He gave his thoughts. And I will never contest him. He thinks what he said very good. I don't see any problem, nothing aggressive from President Boric. President Boric has been saying that for many months. It's important that he will continue. Only he can say what he thinks. Now, I can't say what he thinks for. The second issue that I talked about, I called the ratings agency to talk, because the ratings agent, they have a track record. They go to Brazil, they have meetings in Brazil, they have offices in Brazil, in São Paulo, in Rio. The ratings agencies, they make their, and I made jokes with them saying that I have such a bad luck in this business that I never answered to any poll, electoral poll, or any survey. Never. And so I never had any question from the National Census Bureau. They never came to me. So I called the ratings agency for a meeting because it's important that you should know directly from the President of the Republic of what's going on in our country. You don't have to listen only to the bankers. You only have to listen only to the business sector. Listen to the workers and listen to the President of the Republic. And they've been decent and talked to the finance minister and the people from the Treasury. But I wanted to show them a little bit what's going on in Brazil. And what is going on in Brazil? The markets said that in January 2023 that we would grow 0.8% last year. We grew 3%. It could have been 2.9999, okay, if you want to be accurate. Very well. The market started to say that we were going to grow 1.5 for this year. Now the market is going up the prediction to 3.5% of the GDP growth this year. So I want people to remind what happened in Brazil that many times the press doesn't remember. Let's remember 2 magical words that I said during my campaign. The first one, so that a country have success, it's necessary for us to guarantee some important things. First, we used to say in the campaign trail, we need fiscal stability, and then we need economic stability, and then we need political stability, and then we need judicial stability, and it's necessary for us to have social stability. And last but not the least, we need predictability. And this is what we do. Nothing happens from after midnight. Everything we shed light. We're transparent. And with this country, with all its mark of instability that we had, and this, we now offer stability. And we are offering now more stability with the approval of the tax reform by the Congress, something that seemed impossible to be done. And you remember very well what we see in terms of investment going on in Brazil. For how long you haven't listened to investments of the automobile industry in Brazil? Well, they just announced an investment of 130 billion reais till 2028. And for how long you haven't heard investments in the pulp and paper industry, in the steel industry? 105 billion reais. So besides the new industries that have 142 billion for financing from private and public sector. These investments didn't happen in Brazil for a long time. We still need more investment, and we need more stability so things could happen. What I want to show is that there are very few countries that behave with the seriousness that Brazil is behaving. And I want to say to what I said in 2005 to the managing director of the IMF. I learned my first economics lessons by a woman that was illiterate, which was my mother. And I learned with my mother that with my salary and with my brother's salary, said what we had to do with the money, she would say. And now what I do in the economy is the same thing. I cannot spend more than I have, than I collect. If I have to build a debt, this debt will not be for current expenses. This debt will be for a new investment, a public investment will lead to asset growth in the country. And when you do that, you're not spending it. This is not government spending, it's government investment. And this is the country that the world should get to know. This is the country. I've done that once already, and I've seen the country growing 7.5%, commerce 13%, and the people experience the best lives in their lives, and the automobile industry selling 3,800,000 cars per year, and now they're only selling 1.8 million cars. What happened to our country in the last years? What happened is that they were lacking government, and for you to govern a country is to know for whom you want to govern for. And I have a clear-cut mark that I govern for all, but mainly for the poor, for those people that are more in need and want, will be always top priority in my political decisions. And now there's even more. Now we have the black people's issue. We have the LGBTQ+, the women that are now occupying an important space. And so more and more we have to pay attention. I think that we passed something in Brazil that many countries, developed countries, did not equal pay for women and men. And I told to some women soccer players that they should earn more money than the men, because we're 6 times champion in the female soccer in Brazil. So these women are earning more than men. If they play better than the men, they should earn more than the men in soccer. And so I'm very proud. I went last night to this dinner with the business. I almost hadn't had dinner because I wanted to convince people. So I talked and I use all the potential that I have in that moment to show Brazil is going to be that. This is what's going to happen because the Brazilian people needs this. And I want you to know that we have a chance in this second half of this 21st century. That is an extraordinary opportunity that we do not and we cannot afford to miss this opportunity. Brazil has to be a country that will be the barn of renewable sources of energy, of any kind of renewable source of energy. And this is what's going to give Brazil the greatness that Brazil needs to transform itself in an economy that is fair, sustainable, and with a good quality of life for its people. The last question coming on. Just a minute for him to put his headset. Wait a second, please.
Thank you. Obrigada. Mr. President, it's Pamela Falk from U.S. News and World Report. Since you've answered a lot of questions about the world and you mentioned your football team in Brazil, I'd like to know your thoughts on the fact that American football, NFL, just began games in Sao Paulo and around the world. Can Brazilian football and American football live side by side?
Eu confesso à jornalista que me fez a pergunta que eu fiquei surpreso com a quantidade de brasileiros e
Brazilians. I confess to the journalist that asked me the question then about the amount of people that enjoy and follow the American soccer. Since I was raised and I'm an expert in soccer. I can't understand the American football. I see a bunch of men falling down, racing a ball, and the ball is too high and low. It has to go in the middle. But I think it's fantastic. I think what was proved in that game in the Corinthians Stadium is that the North American football could be practiced with great success in Brazil. And I hope so. Because since I have grandsons and I want to have grand-grandsons, maybe they can be players of American football, as you said. That's it. I was very happy with the fact because it was an unprecedented experience, an extraordinary, positive experience for Brazil. Thank you very much. Now, I have to go now.
Uma colher de chá aqui.
Rádio Itatiaia Radio. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like you to talk a little bit. Did something advance in terms of the Mercosur agreement with the European Union, with Pedro Macron, and with the President of the European Commission, and the COP chairman? I would have had the expectation that you would announce something new for the COP 30. I have a lot of time. I'm going to Baku, COP29. I will attend the Baku meeting, and from there I leave with the presidency of the chairmanship of COP 30, and then I'll go to Brazil, who will be chair of the COP. I never was optimistic with the agreement between the Mercosur and the European Union. Yesterday, I told to Ursula von der Leyen, that is our sister that negotiates this agreement, together with my ministers, that Brazil is ready to sign this agreement. And then now the responsibility is of the European Union and not on Brazil's side. Because for 20 years, they put the blame on the countries of the Mercosur. And we're ready on our side, the Mercosur, to make the agreement. And I have told her that if you prepare yourselves, we can even sign this agreement during the meeting of the G20 in Brazil, or maybe a meeting with champagne at the headquarters of the European Union. And we're ready for the agreement. I think the agreement will come out. And we need this agreement because we have many other agreements to entail. I have to make a strategic agreement with India. India is a very big country, and our bilateral trade is very small. If you imagine the size of the two economies, we want to work in a better way with China. We want to work the issues with the European Union. We want to go back to work with our policies in South America and Latin America. I'm going to Mexico. I'm going to arrive in Brazil tomorrow late night. On Sunday, I already leave to Mexico, and on Monday, I have a meeting of Brazilian entrepreneurs in Mexico, and I'll try to convince the Mexicans to invest more in Brazil and the Brazilians invest in Mexico, and to try to convince Brazil to buy more from Mexico and the Mexican to buy. Foreign trade policies that sell and buy, not only to sell. We have to sell and buy. And then I participate to President Klaus' inauguration and come back, and then I only travel to Baku, and then to Kazan, and then here in Brazil with the G20. You're all invited to the G20 in Rio. Thank you very much.